She sat alone in the quiet night, her eyes fixed on the endless stars. Her name was Lyra, and her people once called her race the Children of Dawn. But now, they were only a shadow of that name, a dying people with empty homes and silent halls. Lyra remembered the words that had followed her since childhood. Motherhood is impossible. You will never carry life. No child will ever call you mother. These words were spoken by doctors, by leaders, by her own family. They were not cruel words. They were facts, written into her people's blood. Her species had lost the ability to create new life generations ago. And so, every heart carried grief. Every home carried silence. Yet tonight, as she sat in the darkness, she felt something stir inside her. Not in her body, but in her memory. It was the memory of a man, not of her world, not of her kind. A human man who looked at her fate and said only one thing. Impossible? No, not for us. When she first met him, the universe mocked her. Her friends laughed, saying humans were reckless, foolish, too young among the stars. Her elders warned her, saying humans were dangerous because they never listened. And her people pitied her, whispering behind her back. She will never be a mother, and now she ties herself to a man who believes in fairy tales. But Lyra remembered his eyes, steady and stubborn. She remembered the way he spoke, not as a dreamer, but as someone who had already decided. He told her stories of Earth, of humans who climbed mountains that could not be climbed, of humans who fought battles they should have lost, of humans who reached the stars when everyone said it was madness. And he told her, "Your people accept endings, but my people, we fight them." That night, Lyra asked him, "But what if nature says no? What if the universe itself has closed the door?" He only smiled, his voice low but firm. "Then we will break the door, or we will build a new one." Lyra never forgot those words. She had grown up in silence, carrying sorrow. But he carried something else, something heavy, something bright, hope. And hope was more dangerous than any weapon, more dangerous than any army. The memory of that hope burned in her chest as she stared at the stars. Her people believed the future was already dead, but her human husband did not believe in death without a fight. And slowly, she began to wonder if he was right. What if the impossible was not truly impossible? What if the universe had lied? The thought was dangerous. Hope was forbidden among her kind, because hope could break the heart when the truth returned. But she could not erase his voice from her mind. Where others see walls, humans build doors. As the cold night wrapped around her, Lyra remembered the whispers that spread through her city when she chose him. "She is desperate," they said. "She is foolish," others answered. But no one knew what she felt when she stood beside him. It was as if his spirit was made of fire, and that fire had touched her. For the first time in her life, she did not feel cold. She did not feel alone. And then came the day when he looked into her eyes and told her something that made her heart stop. "I will make you a mother," he said, not in a voice of doubt, not as a dream, but as a promise against science, against destiny, against the universe itself. At first, she was afraid. What if he was wrong? What if she allowed herself to believe, only to break again? But there was something in his tone that made her tremble. Not because of fear, but because for the first time, she believed him. For the first time, she thought, maybe it can happen. Now, sitting in the silence of the night, she held that memory close. His words repeated in her mind, steady as a heartbeat. "I will make you a mother." Outside, the stars burned with ancient fire. Inside her, a storm was waiting to rise. The story of her people said it was impossible, but humans were strange creatures. Humans were stubborn, and sometimes humans changed the story the universe had already written. And so the question remained, hanging in the darkness like a blade of light. Would his promise break her heart? Or would his defiance change the fate of two worlds? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The world of Lyra was beautiful, but it was a beauty filled with silence. Once, her people had walked through golden fields where the wind carried the laughter of children. Now those fields stood empty, untouched, as if waiting for voices that would never return. Her race had been called the Children of Dawn because they were the first to rise among the stars. They had built great cities across the galaxy, spreading wisdom and order. But what was the use of wisdom when no child was born? What was the use of great cities when no one would inherit them? The curse of her people was not brought by war, not by plague. It was a slow death, hidden in their own blood. Generations ago, the spark of life had simply vanished. No mother carried a child. No cradle was filled. Doctors tried. Scientists searched. Priests prayed. But the answer never came. And so, the Children of Dawn aged without children, waiting for the end. Lyra had grown up in this silence. She remembered walking past homes where dust covered toys. She remembered meeting women who wept when they thought no one saw them. And she remembered the way everyone spoke of fate. Cold, final, merciless. Fate had spoken, and no one could change it. Her own family had carried that despair. Her mother once told her, "Do not dream. Lyra, dreaming will only hurt you." Her father said nothing at all, because silence was easier than false hope. And so, she learned to smile without joy, to laugh without heart. Because what future could exist in a world where children did not? Then came the humans. Compared to her people, humans were young, wild, reckless. They were newcomers to the stars, carrying scars from their own wars. Her people looked at them with pity, sometimes even with disgust. They burn too fast, the elders said. They do not last long. They waste their strength on impossible dreams. But Lyra saw something else. Where people walked with bowed heads, humans walked with fire in their eyes. Where her people whispered about endings, humans shouted about beginnings. They fought, they failed, they bled. Yet they always stood again. It was strange, even dangerous. And perhaps that was why she could not look away. When she first met the human who would become her husband, she expected nothing. He was unlike her kind, his face marked by lines of hardship and laughter. His eyes carried storms, yet also a warmth she had never known. He did not speak like the others of her world. He did not accept silence. When she told him her people's fate, he listened, but he did not bow his head. He only asked, "And who decided this fate? Who told you it cannot change?" Lyra almost laughed at him then. She thought he was foolish, blind to truth. But something in his voice stayed with her, because in his words there was no fear, only defiance. Her people had learned to survive without children. They poured their knowledge into books that no one would ever read. They carved monuments that no child would ever see. It was survival without hope. And in that emptiness, Lyra's heart had grown tired, until he entered her life, until he spoke of dreams not as curses, but as promises waiting to be broken. The human told her stories of Earth, stories of mothers who carried children through famine, of fathers who raised families in war, of people who crossed oceans with nothing but hope in their hearts. And then he said something she would never forget. Your people gave up when the universe said no, but humans never stop asking why not. Lyra wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Her people warned her again and again. Hope is poison, Lyra. It will only kill you. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw no poison. She saw life, burning and stubborn. And for the first time, she wondered if hope could heal instead of destroy. The broken world around her had shaped every part of her soul. But when she walked beside him, she felt something her kind had forgotten. The sense that tomorrow could still be different. The thought frightened her, because if he was wrong, the fall would be endless. But if he was right, then the silence of her people would not last forever. If he was right, then the golden fields would hear the laughter of children once again. And perhaps, just perhaps, the universe itself would have to admit that it was wrong. The silence of Lyra's people was heavy. They walked with heads bowed, voices low, hearts tired. They accepted their fate like prisoners accept chains. But one man refused to bow. Her husband, the human, looked at that silence and broke it with a single truth. Nothing is final until we say it is. At first, Lyra thought his words were only human stubbornness. Humans had a strange hunger to fight against everything, storms, mountains, even death itself. But soon she realized it was more than hunger. It was the very soul of his kind. He would spend nights with books of alien medicine. He studied scrolls written in languages not his own. He spoke with healers, with scientists, with priests who had long given up. And when they laughed at him, he laughed back. If the universe closes the door, he told them, then we will build a new one. Lyra watched him work with hands scarred by a lifetime of struggle. His eyes burned as if failure itself was not an end, but only another step. He mixed human medicine with alien science. He drew maps of the body that no one had drawn before. He asked questions no one dared to ask. And always, his voice carried the same fire. Why not? Her people whispered about him. Reckless human, they said. Madness, they called it. But Lyra felt her heart stir, because madness had more life in it than all the silence around her. One night, as he worked by the faint glow of his instruments, she asked, "Why do you fight for this? It is not your curse, not your burden." He looked at her then, tired but unbroken. "Because it matters to you," he said simply, "and if it matters to you, then it matters to me." His words cut through the walls she had built around her heart. He did not fight for glory, nor for history. He fought because he loved her, and love, she realized, was a weapon her people had long forgotten. The weeks turned into months. Lyra saw his defiance spread like a quiet flame. Some of her people began to wonder, to whisper, could it be true? Could the impossible bend before human hands? Others grew angry, calling it blasphemy. But he did not stop. He did not slow. There were failures, painful ones. Her body, weakened once, nearly broke. The healers begged him to abandon his work. But his answer was always the same. Every wall can be broken. Every chain can be cut. For the first time in generations, hope began to rise. It was fragile, dangerous, but alive. And Lyra carried it in her heart like a hidden flame. Because when she looked at her husband, she saw something her people had never seen. A refusal to surrender. Humans were short-lived compared to her kind. They burned fast, and then they were gone. But maybe that was why they fought so fiercely. Because every moment mattered, every heartbeat was war against time. And in that war, surrender was unthinkable. One evening, under the cold stars, he took her hands in his and said softly, "They call it impossible, but I will not stop until the universe itself admits it is wrong." And for the first time, Lyra believed him completely. Not because she understood his science, not because she trusted his plans, but because she knew what burned inside him. Defiance. And defiance could move mountains. Defiance could shake the stars. The world around them was still broken. Her people still walked in silence. But in the heart of one human burned the fire that could turn silence into song. And Lyra felt the truth press against her soul like the first breath of dawn. The universe had written its story, but humans, strange, reckless humans, were willing to rewrite it, Wort by Wort, Linne by Linne. And so the broken world waited for the moment when one man's defiance would either shatter everything or bring back the miracle that had been lost for centuries. The changes began quietly, almost hidden. At first, it was only small things. Lyra felt her strength shift, her body stirring in ways it never had before. She told no one, not even her husband, for fear it was only a dream. But the dream grew louder with each passing day. Her people believed such changes were dangerous, unnatural. For generations, they had been told their bodies could no longer carry life. To imagine otherwise was seen as madness, even crime. And yet, Lyra could not deny what she felt. Something alive, something different. Her husband noticed before she spoke. His eyes caught the faint glow of her skin, the rhythm of her pulse. When she tried to hide it, he simply placed his hand over hers and whispered, "It has begun." The words filled her with both joy and terror. Because if it was true, If a child was growing inside her, the world would not celebrate. The council would not bless her. They would call it an abomination. And yet, she wanted to believe. No, she needed to believe. The news could not stay hidden forever. Healers examined her, their faces turning pale, their voices shaking. "This is impossible," they said. "This cannot be," they repeated. But their eyes betrayed fear, not certainty. Words spread quickly, carried on whispers through empty streets. Lyra, the barren, the hopeless, now carried what no other had in centuries. Some called it a miracle, others called it a curse. The elders gathered in secret, their voices sharp, their judgment swift. "This must be ended," they declared. "This union is dangerous. This child is forbidden." But her husband stood before them, his voice unshaken. "You call it forbidden, I call it life." The elders spoke of balance, of nature's law, of destiny. But he answered with only one truth. Destiny is written by those brave enough to challenge it. The city trembled with division. Some citizens knelt in prayer, thanking the stars for hope. Others raised their fists, demanding the child be destroyed before it was born. Lyra felt the weight of their eyes wherever she went. Pity, fear, hatred, hope, all of it pressed against her like chains. At night, when the noise grew too heavy, she lay beside her husband and whispered, "What if they are right? What if this is not a gift, but a danger?" He pulled her close, his voice steady as iron. "Then I will face the danger, but I will not let them take this from you." Her heart burned with his words, but fear still lived inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt both fragile and powerful. She carried not only her own hope, but the hope of a dying world. And hope, she realized, was the most dangerous burden of all. The days passed, her body changing more. Her people began to avoid her, as if afraid to breathe the same air. But some followed her with silent eyes, eyes that carried questions they dared not ask. Could the impossible truly be happening? Could a human's defiance rewrite the story of their kind? Her husband worked endlessly, guarding her from threats, from whispers, from fear. Every test, every step, he met with calm fire. He was not a scientist of her world, not a priest, not a leader. Yet he had done what none of them could. He had taken the impossible and made it real. And Lyra knew, if the council tried to stop them, he would fight. If the world turned against them, he would stand alone. Because he had already chosen his path the day, he told her, "I will make you a mother." Now that promise lived inside her. Each heartbeat, each breath carried the sound of a new beginning. But beginnings are always fragile. And in the silence of the night, she feared what price the universe would demand. Would this miracle save her people, or would it destroy them? No one could answer, but one truth shone brighter than the stars above. The miracle had already begun, and no one, not even the council, not even the universe itself, could erase it. The storm did not come from the skies. It came from the voices of her people, once silent, now filled with fear and anger. The council gathered in their high chambers, faces pale, eyes cold. Their words echoed across the city. This must be stopped. The child must not be born. They called it dangerous, unnatural, a threat to balance. To them, the unborn life was not hope, but a weapon against tradition. Lyra stood before them, trembling but unbroken. Her hands rested over her stomach, her voice a whisper. It is not a curse. It is life. But her words were swallowed by their fury. Life? No, it is a mistake. End it before it spreads ruin. Her heart sank, but before despair could take her, he stepped forward. The human, her husband, his shadow long in the council's light. He looked at the elders without fear. "You speak of ruin," he said, "but what ruins a world faster than silence?" The chamber stirred with gasps, anger rising. How dare a human, an outsider, speak so boldly? But he did not stop. "Your people fade because you accept it. You bow to death and call it destiny. We humans, we do not bow." His words spread through the hall like fire. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others clenched their fists in rage. And the council's leader struck the ground with his staff. "You will end this madness, or we will end it for you." Lyra's heart froze. She felt the weight of their threat press against her like a blade. But her husband only stepped closer to her. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his voice iron. "If you want to take her child, you will have to go through me." That night, whispers spread through every corner of the city. Some called him brave, others called him reckless. But all knew this truth. The human would not surrender. Not to the council, not to tradition, not even to the universe itself. The days that followed were harder. Guards watched them, priests cursed them, healers begged her to give up. Even friends turned away, too afraid to stand beside her. But Lyra carried her burden with quiet strength, and her husband carried the weight of the world with unshaken fire. At times, doubt clawed at her. When pain surged through her body, when the world seemed too heavy, she whispered in the dark, "What if they are right? What if this destroys us?" But always, his answer was the same, calm and certain. "Then let it destroy me. But not you. Not our child." His words became her shield. Each day, she watched him face those who hated him. He was only one man, yet he stood as if he carried an army behind him. Perhaps, she thought, that was the secret of humans. They carried whole armies inside their hearts. One evening, a group of council guards came to their door. Their orders were clear: take her to the healers, end the life before it began. But when they stepped forward, the human blocked their way. He stood barehanded, yet unyielding. "You call yourselves guardians," he said, "but you are executioners. You fear what you do not understand. I will not let you touch her." The guards hesitated. There was no weapon in his hand, but there was something sharper in his eyes. They saw not a man, but a force that would not break. And slowly, they lowered their arms, stepping back into the shadows. Lyra wept that night, not from fear, but from awe. Her husband had defied not only the council, but the weight of history itself. And he did it not with power, not with armies, but with love. The struggle was not over. The council would not forget. The city would not forgive so easily. But in that moment, she knew the truth. He would fight until his last breath. He would face the fury of the universe itself, because he had given her a promise. And humans did not break promises so easily. Outside, the city burned with anger and fear. Inside their home, a fragile heartbeat grew stronger. And Lyra realized that the greatest battle had already begun. A battle not with swords or armies, but with courage, love, and defiance. The struggle would decide not only their future, but the fate of two worlds. The night of storms came without warning. Dark clouds split the sky. Lightning tore across the heavens. The city below trembled as if the universe itself had come to judge. Inside their small home, Lyra cried out. Her body was breaking, torn between pain and something far greater. She had never felt such fire inside her veins. It was life and death wrestling within her, and she was its battlefield. Her husband was at her side, his hands steady even as fear burned in his eyes. He wiped her sweat. He whispered words she could barely hear. "Hold on, Lyra. You're stronger than this. We are stronger than this." Outside, the council gathered. Priests chanted, declaring the child an omen. Guards stood ready, waiting for the command to end what they called an abomination. But none dared enter, because within that house was a human who had defied them all. Hours dragged like centuries. Each scream tore through the walls. Each silence felt like death. Lyra's people listened from the streets. Fear and hope tangled in their hearts. Was this the end of their world, or its rebirth? Lyra clutched her husband's hand until her nails drew blood. "I cannot," she gasped. Her body was weak, her heart fading. But he bent close, his voice fierce. "You can. You will. Because you are not alone. I am here. Always." Her tears fell, mixing with sweat. And in that moment, she remembered every silence of her people, every empty cradle, every broken dream. She thought of her mother's words. "Do not dream, Lyra. It will only hurt you." and she thought of her husband's words. Then we will build a new door. Pain shook her again, sharp as fire. Her voice broke into the storm, and then a cry answered her. It was not her voice, nor her husband's. It was smaller, softer, yet louder than thunder itself. The cry of a newborn. The sound her world had not heard for centuries. Lyra collapsed back, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with disbelief. In her husband's arms was the child, red-faced, fragile, alive. Tears ran down his face as he placed the child against her chest. Lyra, he whispered, voice breaking. You are a mother. Her hands trembled as she touched the tiny life. The warmth of it, the weight of it, the impossible truth of it. And she wept, not from pain, but from joy so sharp it felt like light. Her heart whispered to the stars. They said I never could, but I did. Outside, the crowd had grown silent. The cry of the child had reached them. Men and women froze, staring at one another. It was a sound none of them had heard since the time of legends. And in that moment, every wall of disbelief cracked. The council staggered, their lips dry, their voices gone. The priests who had spoken of curses now fell silent. Because how could they deny what their ears had heard? Life, born from impossibility. A child, half human, half dawn, breathing proof that fate could be broken. The storm outside began to calm. Rain washed over the golden fields. And for the first time in generations, it did not feel like mourning. It felt like cleansing, like beginning. Inside, Lyra held her child close. Her husband sat beside her, exhausted but unbowed. They had faced a world, a universe, and still they had won, not with weapons, not with armies, but with faith, defiance, and love. Her people stood in silence. Some wept, some knelt, some simply stared, because in that small cry, they heard something greater than fear. They heard the return of hope. And though questions still lingered, what would this child become? Would it bring salvation or danger? None of it mattered in that moment, because for the first time in centuries, a mother cradled her child, and the universe itself had been forced to bow to the impossible. The morning after the storm was unlike any other. The golden fields outside the city glistened with rain. For the first time in centuries, the sun rose not on silence, but on hope. Lyra sat by the window, her child resting in her arms. The tiny heartbeat against her chest was the proof of everything the universe had denied. She looked down at the small face, half hers, half his, and whispered, "You are the first song after silence." Her husband stood beside her, silent but proud. His eyes carried the exhaustion of battles fought without weapons, yet also the fire of a man who had done the impossible. The man who had promised her motherhood, and kept that promise. Outside, the city gathered. Crowds filled the streets, not with laughter, not yet, but with wide eyes and hushed voices. They had heard the cry of the child, and now they had come to see if it was real. When Lyra stepped outside, holding the baby close, silence swept over them. Her people stared at her, some with awe, others with fear. The council stood at the front, their robes heavy with shame. None dared speak, because the truth was in her arms, and truth cannot be denied. Her husband's voice broke the silence, strong and steady. You told us it was impossible. You said no child would ever be born again. But here is the proof that the universe was wrong. His words echoed across the plaza. Some wept, some turned away, but all listened, because even the most stubborn heart could not ignore the sound of life. The council tried to recover, their leader stepping forward. This is dangerous. It will bring imbalance. But his words were weak, trembling, and the human's reply struck harder than thunder. No, what brings imbalance is silence. What destroys worlds is giving up. Humans do not give up, and now, neither can you. For the first time, the children of dawn looked at a human not as reckless or foolish, but as something greater, as a spark of fire that could burn even in the darkest void. Lyra lifted her child higher, her voice breaking through tears. You called it forbidden, you called it curse, but it is neither. This is hope. This is life, and it will carry us into tomorrow. The crowd bent under the weight of her words. Some fell to their knees, not in worship, but in surrender to truth. Others turned their faces, afraid to believe. But none could deny the sound of the child's breath, the proof that endings could become beginnings. In that moment, the legend of the children of dawn changed. No longer were they only the first race to rise among the stars. Now, they were the race that had been given a second chance by a human. Her husband took her hand, their child between them. His voice softer now, meant for her alone. You see, we broke the wall. We built the door. And she smiled through her tears, whispering. And on the other side, there was life. The people would argue for years to come. The council would resist, the priests would debate. But history had already been rewritten because one man refused to accept what was written in stone, because one woman dared to believe again, and because one child, fragile but fierce, carried both their worlds in a single heartbeat. As the sun rose higher, the city's silence began to crack, not with cries of fear this time, but with something else, soft laughter, cautious smiles, the sound of a people remembering what it felt like to hope. And so it was said, in days to come, the children of dawn were saved not by their wisdom, not by their ancient power, but by a human's defiance, by a human's refusal to surrender, by the fire in a heart that believed even the universe could be wrong. And Lyra, once told she would never be a mother, became the first mother of a new age. Her story whispered across stars, carried through generations. A story that ended not with silence, but with a child's cry. A cry that proved one simple, unshakable truth. Humans are special, and sometimes it takes a human to teach the universe how to hope again.